And again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Three of the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
All right, we're back with a little bit of deja vu, I guess. The Ducks fall late to the Vegas Golden Knights 2-1 in overtime. I was going to say probably the kind of worst way you could fall after, leading with a minute to go. It's probably not the worst way because I'm remembering back to come back on Catella, and I feel like if you're an Oilers fan, that's probably worse than this. But this was a tough one. Gibson fought the Ducks almost to, full 2 points in this game. But Wild Bill ties the game with just over a minute remaining, and then probably the worst 3-on-3 overtime start and finish that I've ever seen by this team. And we joke that the Ducks are bad at overtime. We've pretty much been saying that for the last couple seasons here, but this takes the cake as the worst 3-on-3 overtime. Not even just in Ducks history, probably in since the 3-on-3 format has begun. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a goal that quick where the faceoff gets won, Stone and Pacioretty break the other way, and the puck's in the back of the net within, 5 seconds?
Yeah, well, the other thing is, it almost looked like a drill. It was such a clean 2-on-1 that it just almost looked like a drill. Like they were just running it just to get better. So, I don't know. I'm just going to assume that the Ducks knew that everybody needed sleep. And so they just had to wrap that game up as quick as possible.
I get the momentum shifts at that point. Vegas was kind of getting back into the game. The Ducks had done a pretty good job of kind of closing down the chances there. Obviously, the start to this game wasn't great, and Vegas was all over Anaheim just like they were in Game 1 a couple days ago. But I think that, after the Comtois goal, the Ducks kind of got back into it a little bit and kind of held off Vegas for most of the game until that late goal where they broke through, and you just kind of felt the momentum shift. And, did I think that Vegas was going to score that early in overtime? No. But you kind of felt like they were due for another one. The way they were playing, the way they were pressuring the Ducks at that point. And, it's a tough one. The Ducks get a point out of it, which I guess is some solace at the end of the day. But you really felt like they could have grinded this one out. For John Gibson, let alone if anybody in this game, the way he played, I think he was the number one star for the Ducks. Made plenty of key saves in this game. We're not expecting much from this season, but you would still like to see them close out this game and get 2 points and kind of reward John Gibson with the shutout.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, what you see is one of two ways, hopefully, that the games go this season. You see John Gibson played really well tonight. He just looked really good. And the team did enough around him to keep it, I don't know, competitive. I don't want to say competitive, but the scoreline was competitive.
Yeah.
They kept themselves in it, to their credit. And that's kind of what mattered. And then, look, it goes to overtime and 3-on-3. Like, that's just a skills competition. I don't want to say it like it's a skill is almost always going to win out in a situation where you're on 3-on-3 overtime. And I don't think the Ducks really have anybody that would crack the top 2 or 3 lines that Vegas can put together.
Well, who did the Ducks roll out there? It was Sam Steele and who the other?
Steele, Raquel, and Fowler.
Yeah, and you look at the other side, and you've got Pacioretty, Mark Stone, and Shea Theodore was the trio that Vegas started the game with, and the Ducks, any of the Ducks top 3 that you could roll out there would be improved by adding any one of those guys to it. And you look at maybe even Vegas' second unit when you put, Marchessault or Carlson out there with Pietrangelo. That's probably their second unit. And that itself could likely be better than any unit the Ducks could ice. So when you have to go against those two kind of 3-man units that Vegas could have put out there, it was always going to be a tough go for the Ducks to kind of get things done in overtime. We'll go through the game here and kind of break down some of the key moments. There was a few things pre-game to get to. Same lineup as opening night, which was a bit surprising because we heard that Andy Welinski got activated off the taxi squad. Cody Curran was sent back onto the taxi squad. We figured that Sonny Milano could check into this game in place of Isaac Lindstrom. Lindstrom didn't look great in game one, only played, I think, 11 minutes, so we kind of just felt like Milano could be the guy to check in, but nope, they go with the same lineup, and I was a bit surprised by that. I thought there would be a little bit of mix-up. Not that the Ducks played an awful game in game one, despite losing 5-2, but you kind of felt like some changes were inbound, especially with the taxi squad moves.
Yeah, I think the big one for me was seeing Lundestrom was still in there. He didn't look good last game. He didn't look great this game. He looked a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable. I think one of the takeaways for me from this game is you can at least see what the coaching staff sees in Lundestrom, putting him on that line with those two. I think Heinen has shown a little bit more offensive pop than I would have given him credit for. And Lundestrom was just kind of trying to run around, and he just wasn't able to create space for himself. He's still kind of learning the game. He looked tonight the way Sam Steele has looked for the last the last year and a half or whatever, where you can see that he can do what he needs to do and get where he needs to get. He just doesn't have the comfort or the experience yet to kind of really know the way and the feel of the game. So
the one thing for me, and we have to mention this before we get into the breakdown of the game, those Vegas jerseys, my God, when they first came out, and when you don't see it as a setup, and you kind of see it as like a dolled up store image that they want to present, they don't look that bad. But man, on the ice, they go from a gold to a mustard type color, paired up with the same color gloves and the black shorts. God, man, those did not turn out the way I thought they would.
Yeah, no, those are awful.
Need a Vegas gold jersey and Wild Wing jersey showdown at some point this year.
Look, if we're gonna we can't do this. It's too early in the show to have an argument about why the Wild Wing jersey is the best.
I like the Wild Wing jersey. I like it. I'm the only one. I know now you, but we're the only ones on the show who like this. Pat and Jay don't like the Wild Wing jersey. I think Keith has to be the decision maker here on whether he likes the Wild Wing jersey or not. There's a lot of our listeners who don't like it, and there's a lot of Ducks fans who do like the jersey. But we've had this debate a million times. I think the one thing everybody can agree on is basically everybody do not like those Vegas Golden Knights jerseys, especially in the whole setup. Awful, just awful.
Yeah, no, the whole thing looks bad, and I'm not even a big fan of the gloves. Like, I like white gloves, but I don't like that they're kind of patchwork. Like, they're not even completely white, which I think would make them a little bit better for me. But the gold is just so much. And, it feels kind of dumb because it's one of those things where you're always like, oh, yeah, we wish that they would be a little bit more interesting or whatever. But then you're just like, it's not so much interesting, it's just ugly.
They might not even be Vegas's worst jerseys either. Their reverse retros are red. Like, they're a very, very bright red.
Because they've got the shoulder patch as the main logo on those, right?
Yeah, the crossed swords, I think, right? Yeah. I will not. Hopefully, they don't wear those against us because this was painful enough. Couple other pregame notes we had to get to. We speculated last podcast about Ben Hutton because there was kind of conflicting rumors whether he still was on a PTO, whether he was going to sign or not. It wasn't really anything concrete, just a weird tweet from Elite Prospects that said he got demoted from the Anaheim Lady Ducks under 16 team to unknown, and then a couple other sources saying that they heard that he was released from his PTO, which ended up not being true. He ends up signing a $950K one-year contract. You would have to think, I mean, Larson didn't have a bad game here, but you would have to think at some point Ben Hutton likely checks into this lineup. Cody Curran's waiver exempt, so he can easily get placed on and off of the taxi squad, and same with Andy Welinski. So I would think with Ben Hutton coming in here, maybe not next game, but at some point once he gets kind of caught up to speed here, that he's going to check into the lineup, whether it's, you know, on his offside playing beside Jakob Larsson or maybe playing with Hakanpää or Welinski. You know, I think we're pretty close to seeing Ben Hutton get his first game in a Ducks uniform.
Yeah, you know, I think the thing that's really interesting to me is when you look at the third pair right now, which is Larsson and Hakanpää, it may not be true, you know, but what you see is a defenseman who can skate the puck and a defenseman who is going to stand still and be big. And, you know, I think I wonder if when Ben Hutton makes his first appearance, if Cody Curran makes his same appearance too, because, you know, the one thing we know about Cody Curran is he actually prefers to play the right side, which is his offside. And Ben Hutton's a lefty, I'm pretty sure. So, you know, the idea of those two playing together and you still having that kind of, you know, skill and grit dynamic on your third pair, like, I think it could be intriguing. You know, I'm not expecting too much out of any of the bottom four defensemen as far as the guys that are going to bounce up and down and be on that third pair. But Curran is someone I'm definitely interested to see. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's expecting too much from Ben Hutton or from that bottom pairing defense. They look better this game. I'll give them that credit. And obviously Larsson picked up the primary assist on the Comtois goal, which was a pretty good effort from him. I don't think at any point in this season are we ever going to be wowed by that bottom pairing. I think, like you said, there is some, I don't know if upside is the right word, but, you know, there's a mystery about Cody Curran and what he could provide to this lineup because we haven't seen him, and there's no NHL experience to kind of fall back on and say this is the type of player he is, right? You can maybe dig up some SHL footage from when he was in Sweden and kind of go and kind of stake your claim on that, but there is an air of mystery around him on what he could provide, so I am kind of interested in seeing him. And obviously we talked about Josh Mahura on the last podcast too, and potentially seeing what he can. So there are some interesting options, but when you speak of Larsson and Hakanpää and Welinski and Ben Hutton, you kind of know what you're going to expect from those guys. You know, we have a lot of experience watching Welinski, Hakanpää, and Jakob Larsson for the last couple seasons, and you know we've seen what Ben Hutton can do at the NHL level, whether it be with the Canucks or with the Kings last year. So, you know, at some point I'm sure we'll see Curran. Whether it's sooner rather than later, that all depends on kind of how the Ducks want to work him into the lineup, and I think the same goes for Josh Mahura. Let's quickly get through the first period here. Not too much really going on in this one. I guess a complete contrast from the last game where there was 4 goals scored in the first period. Vegas trying to get on the board early. A relentless pressure through the first, I guess, 10-15 minutes of this game. But John Gibson made a plenty of good saves in this one. Some bad turnovers led to some high-quality chances for Vegas. A penalty for Nosek for slashing gave the Ducks their first power play, and Sam Steele got the Ducks' best chance of the game early on, where he snuck in behind and Fleury did an old-school diving poke check to deny Steele from getting it to the back end and putting it in the back of the net. But really, this period was 90% Vegas. You know, all the pressure, finished 15-6 in the shots, and John Gibson keeping the Ducks in it early, which I guess you can expect from him, right? Like we said, he's hopefully going to have a bounce-back year this year, and I think these are the types of games we're going to see from John Gibson, where there's going to be a lot of turnovers, there's going to be a lot of chances, there's going to be a lot of high-danger chances, and John Gibson's going to have to stand on his head.
Yeah, no, that's, you know, I mean, we talked about it before, like, if the Ducks want to even be competitive on a nightly basis, John Gibson is going to have to be the best player on the team for 40 games, 50 games. Do I think he can do that? Absolutely. do I also think that we have seen, this is, I don't want to say it. I think there is a degree to which we can look at what happened last year. And to me, it feels like an emotional burnout. Like there was just too much of him having to be basically the only guy on the ice. And so I think, if the team can kind of hold on for dear life and John Gibson can stand on his head for 50 minutes, you only need a couple minutes of something crazy happening. And, now you're looking at a very different game as far as the scoreline is concerned. That's what we saw tonight. I don't think anybody watched that game and thought the Ducks, did anything really to control the tempo of that game. They kind of wrote it out a little bit better than they did the night before, or last game, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to how good John Gibson can be, and then that kind of gets us into the first penalty kill or power play, which was garbage, and that's the other factor, right? Is what can they do at special teams? So,
and even at 5-on-5, I mean, the Ducks didn't generate a ton of high-quality scoring chances in this game. Like we said, the Sam Steele chance on the power play was really the only high-quality chance that they had in the first period. You move into the second, and there was a bit of a lineup change. Raquel was skating with Getzlaf and Heinen for a bit, which I think, when you look at it on paper, makes a little bit more sense. When we talked about yesterday, that line lacking really any finish or any flair with Getzlaf, Lindstrom, and Heinen. And, they paid dividends or got close to paying dividends pretty early when Raquel drove to the net, drew a penalty, and then the rebound comes out to Danton Heinen, and Fleury makes an even better save to keep the game scoreless. Penalty to Vegas, the Ducks get a power play, and of course, as has been traditional for the Ducks over the last couple seasons, the power play didn't generate any chances. It was actually a detriment to the Ducks because the Golden Knights got two shorthanded breakaways, one from Waugh, who snuck in behind, and Gibson made a great save. Waugh faked to go to the backhand and shot forehand, and Gibson got a piece of it, and then Riley Smith breaks in on another breakaway, and Gibson has to deny him too. It's not enough that the Ducks can't generate any offense on their power play. Yeah, they allow two high-quality scoring chances, two breakaways. Luckily, it wasn't a guy like Marcia Show or Mark Stone or Max Pacioretty on the end of these. It was Nicholas Waugh and Riley Smith.
Yeah, I have been beating this drum for a long time. Like, my thing is just the power play is so bad, and there are very few times that I see anything that makes me think they're doing anything to make it better. It just, I will say the one thing I noticed tonight is there seemed to be a far less, if really almost no, of those stupid cross the red line drop passes, which don't actually do anything. I think they just look cool. So it's hard. It's hard to think there's much improvement there. Like you said, they were almost worse for them because they're running around, they're playing right in Vegas's hands, and then Vegas creates a couple opportunities, and they're not able to capitalize on them. But every shot at the other end that you're taking on a penalty kill is better than taking, than having them have the puck in the other end. So, I think we saw tonight what most of us would expect our worst kind of fears to be as far as the quality of play and the chances given up. And the only difference is we didn't give up two quick ones like we did the game before, and so the game just feels a little bit different tonally because of where the scoreline is at.
Fans are never going to dictate what the Ducks front office does in terms of player movement, but if the Ducks continue like this on offense, we've already got people screaming for Trevor Zegras to be playing now, but Maxime Comtois has 100% of the Ducks' goals. They have 3 goals in their first 2 games. Their power plays have looked awful. You almost feel like this team is screaming out for a player like Trevor Zegras. At some point, the pressure to just get him in the lineup is going to be ridiculous. Like, I would say it almost already is, but we're only 2 games into the season. You look at the teams coming up. You're playing Minnesota, who rattled off 2 comeback wins against the Kings in their first 2 games. You've got Colorado, you've got St. Louis coming up. Like, the schedule doesn't get any easier from here, and you've got to face these teams later on in the season as well. I don't know where the offense is going to come from at this point. Obviously right now it's only come from Maxime Comtois. We see on the goal, it was a 3-on-1 with Larson, Hakanpää, and Comtois. Not something I don't think you'll ever see again, where you have the third pairing of the Ducks defense helping Comtois give the Ducks a 1-0 lead on a 3-on-1. I don't know how Vegas got caught, and I think they got caught on a change. But yeah, I mean, this is what you get, I guess, with the Ducks this season. Is this the type of offense you generate, the ones that you kind of don't expect?
Yeah, I think again, what you see is Max Comtois making the game simple. He drives hard from wide. He takes a good angle to that far post, and the defense backs up enough that Larson is able to make a pass across, and he puts it in. And that's why you play that type of game. The problem is, like, with that is that you said, like, if it was anybody but Larson, it might feel a little bit more sustainable, but I don't think any of us, like you said, are expecting Larson to, turn into the second coming of Scott Niedermayer. So, I'm not counting on him jumping into the rush too much. So, I don't know, man. There's a point at which you're just kind of watching it all happen. You go, yeah, this feels about what we were expecting. And, Sam Steele had some flashes tonight of really making nice passes. He looked good. He looked
like there's been improvement there. Like, he looks like he's got a little bit quicker of a first step. He's thinking the game. I think he's slowing down the game a little bit more than he did. He was rushing plays a lot last year. And the creativity is back. And that's something I felt like, going from junior to the NHL, that Sam Steele lost. And a lot of players lose that. It's hard to kind of transition from that level into the NHL and keep that creativity and that skill level. You're playing against much harder opponents. But it feels like Sam Steele's starting to work that back into this game, and obviously it's a small sample size, but I think when you look at these 2 games, there's no question which line has been the Ducks' best line. Not just that Maxime Comtois has 3 goals, but Sam Steele's looked good, and I don't think Troy Terry has looked bad. Now, I think he's probably been the less noticeable player out of the 3 when it comes down to Comtois and Sam Steele, but I think that's clearly been the Ducks' best line, and a lot of that has to do with the development that Sam Steele has had from last season going into this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I said this on Twitter tonight, and it's hard for me to know if he got faster physically or if the game has just slowed down that much for him over the summer. Or not even so. Yeah, over the summer, because we didn't. Yeah. Anyways, because he really does look like he's seeing the whole ice, and he's able to make those plays. That when I was reading up on him about, that's one of the things they say is that he sees the seams. He can make those passes. He doesn't have elite creativity or elite playmaking skills, but he's got enough there that in a second or third line role, he can be able to contribute. And you put him with Terry, who has some offensive upside, and I think, what you're looking at there is a little bit of a force multiplier idea. They're all young. They're all making sure that somebody is riding somebody's ass on that forecheck. And so, I think what you're seeing is just 3 kids who are really hungry, want to stick in the NHL, and they're working for it. And I think if you kind of compare that to the Henrique line, where you've got 3 guys who should be playing much better than they have been, it's hard not to think that more than anything, it's emotional that is allowing that Steel line to be whatever proximity of successful they have been so far.
Yeah, it's almost a carbon copy of what the Ducks tried to get out of a kid line last year. It was Jones, Steele, and Terry for a little bit that we saw last year, and the one thing that line lacked was a finisher. And I give Max Jones some credit because there were some attempts there, and he was pretty unlucky in that first kind of reincarnation of that line when they were put together. But you look at the difference that Maxime Comtois makes being on that line. We put it pretty well on the last podcast that he just does things right. Like he's just.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. I'm not trying to. I don't know how to put this. He's not. He's a simple player, in the sense that he just kind of does the right things. He's not very flashy. Drives to the net hard. He's always in the right position. Like, he makes that line tick. And then you've got a guy like Sam Steele who's got the creativity and the playmaking ability to get the puck to him. And then you add in Troy Terry there, who is probably the best two-way player on that line. Has some speed to himself and pretty good playmaking ability that if you give him the puck, you know he can find you if you're in an open spot. It bodes well for the future for the Ducks, that if this line can get going, that they'll have some chemistry there. Because we know at some point the Raquel, Henrique, and Silfverberg line is going to get things going. They've consistently been a streaky line, the three of them. They can get hot and they can do well for a 5 to 10 game stretch, and then they can disappear for a little bit. The problem with the Ducks this year and over the last couple of years is they don't have any other lines that can really get going to kind of mitigate that inconsistency. When Raquel, Silfverberg, and Henrique aren't going, who's going to pick up the slack? Right now it seems like it's Comtois, Steele, and Terry, but that Getzlaf line has nothing going for it at this point in time, and you're not supposed to rely on a line of Delorier, Grant, and Rowney to give you consistent offense. They've looked how we thought they would look, a decent fourth line for the Ducks, and yeah, they had a couple good scoring chances in this game. Delorier probably could have got a couple goals if Marc-Andre Fleury made a couple good saves there. But outside of Steele, Comtois, and Terry right now, if that Henrique line isn't firing, the Ducks have nothing.
Yeah, and I think that's why when you're looking at a roster and you're looking at kind of player profiles, it's definitely changed over the last few years, where now it's a bit of a top 9 as opposed to a top 6 as far as where you want your skill guys to be. I've said before, I think the modern fourth line is kind of what people thought the third line was 10 years ago. But the problem with the Ducks is they don't have anybody right now at a high impact level. And so, like you said, when a line like that Raquel, Rico, Silfverberg line, which is a perfectly good middle six line. That's exactly what they should be. They can go out, they can eat up minutes when they're on. They can play hard matchups. You know what I mean? I think they're all very responsible. They can all, they all played 200 per game. Like, I don't know that Raquel is, an elite defensive player or anything like that. But he's not bad. He's not a detriment when he's on the ice. And so having those three guys when they're rolling is great. The problem is like you said, when they're not, there's nobody else to take that pressure off of them and help them kind of have a little bit of breathing room to find their game. And so, that's why somebody like Zegras is so exciting, because skill-wise, you see him and you're like, that's a top-line player skill-wise. Whether or not it translates, we are not sure, right? We're going to have to wait and see. But that skill set is easily projectable to a top-line player. And once you have that, you start to see the rest of the roster kind of fall into the roles that they should be in, and it allows everyone to play better.
The pressure on this guy is the one thing that worries me. And not so much that I think he can't handle it, because he's shown that he can handle high-pressure situations. I mean, he led that Team USA team to gold at the World Junior Championship. He was dynamic, and he is a leader, and he is a player that thrives under pressure and has an insane level of confidence. But him coming into this Ducks lineup right now, people are expecting him to be the guy. And I don't think the Ducks have enough pieces for him to come in and really make that difference, even if the skill level translates. Like, we're talking about Steele, Comtois, and Terry being the only good line the Ducks have right now, the only line that's firing, and maybe the Raquel, Silfverberg, and Henrique line gets going. But, who do you put Zegras with right now? Do you put him with Getzlaf and Milano, or Getzlaf and Heinen, and expect him to make that line that much better? Maybe. I worry about the pressure that the team would put on him bringing him up this early. And of course, I'd love to see him. I think this season needs some excitement, and we all want to see him play. But it's hard to think, like, where does he slot in right now and make this team significantly better without, being a detriment to his development and putting that much pressure on a guy to make this team better when, realistically, with him or without him, they're not going to be a playoff team this year.
Right. I think you said it perfectly, is you look at the team that there is and you look at even some of the players that maybe you can talk yourself into pulling up, and there's not, maybe with the exception of some of the kids that were literally just drafted, there's not a lot of infrastructure there to allow someone like Zegras, who's a playmaker, to be able to succeed. And so I think for me, what that is the most obvious indictment of this kind of half in, half out thing that Bob Murray has been doing with this roster, because, we all like Henrique, we all like Silfverberg. These are good guys. But if you move those guys out and now you're taking middle first round, late first round picks, like if they move, Raquel 2 years ago, maybe they're taking Peyton Krebs. And if they take, move Manson, maybe they're getting, LaPierre, Hendrix LaPierre was that kid who went a little late because of the concussions. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, these kind of opportunities that they're passing up in the name of, well, we need good players for when the next great players get here. Yeah, but you don't have enough potentially great players to for sure say they're going to hit. That's why, you look at the Kings and they have Turcotte and they have Kaliev and now they have Byfield and they've got Fagemo. Like, they've got players that even if 1 or 2 or 3 doesn't hit, there's enough other players around them that their prospects are looking good. And that, I think, to me, is the biggest indictment. And exactly like you said, it puts so much undue pressure on Zegras, who is, such a readily identifiable talent. You can, to the extent that, like, he was 10 years old and someone was on a BlackBerry, like, yo, this kid's fucking dope. It's just so easy to see him being an impact NHL player that it makes you wonder who is going to be helping him do that. And it's hard to see anybody. Perreault's got a good shot. Sam Colangelo's got a good shot at being a mid-level goal scorer and having a little bit of a big body and a strong shot, and that's all great. But, like, you give yourself 1 or 2 more of these guys, and you're in a better position. Right now, I think it kind of does feel like if Zegras and Drysdale aren't who we think they are, we're back at square one, and the team's already getting older and older, and John Gibson is getting older, and the trickle down is just so significant from the like I said, half in, half out thing that Bob Murray has been doing, and his inability or unwillingness to make some hard decisions, move on from a couple of players who are good players. They're good for culture. They're good for on-ice performance, all that kind of stuff. But he is almost trying to bring prospects into the team from 4 years ago instead of bringing in prospects to help with the team in 4 years and to work with the other prospects he already has.
Look at some of the teams who have kind of gone the same route as the Ducks, and one of them that comes to mind, like you said, the half in, half out, is the Vancouver Canucks, where they have gone with that half in, half out approach where, yes, they've got Besser and Pettersson and Horvat with some high picks, but then they've made some questionable moves, like bringing in Jay Beagle and Louis Eriksson and Antoine Roussel and Tyler Myers at ridiculous contracts, and now they went out and got Braden Holtby when they already had Jakob Markstrom, and it's this approach that you could have just got piled up the prospects and committed to the rebuild 5-6 years ago, and you would have been fine, and you would have been in a better position. And look at those teams that publicly committed to a rebuild, and we look at some of the top up and coming teams right now: Carolina, New York, LA. these are the teams that did that. They committed to a rebuild. They brought in the prospects when they needed to. They added it to kind of the young core they already had. And those are some of the top up-and-coming teams. Ottawa. Ottawa did that as well. We all laughed at Ottawa. And yes, they got lucky with how bad San Jose was that they ended up getting 2 top 5 picks. But Ottawa committed to the rebuild. Tim Stützle got his first NHL goal tonight. They've got a lot of young players in there. Drake Batherson, Josh Norris, who are making their way in. Obviously, Thomas Chabot is a great player. They have Eric Brandstrom there. They had to bring in a goaltender, so they brought in Matt Murray. So they're starting to kind of bring in those older pieces to kind of help the young guys along. Those are the teams that did it the right way. And like you said, you look at the Ducks being that half in, half out approach. Like, we all think Zegras and Drysdale are going to pan out. They probably will. But like you said, what if they don't? And what do you have after that? And even this year, like, what do you have to bring into the lineup that can make a difference offensively? We're looking at Sonny Milano to make a difference. That's not the guy you want to be trying to bring into the lineup to make a difference. Is a guy who hasn't been able to make the lineup for the first 2 games of the season. Like, he's your 13th forward at this point, and you're hoping that he can come in and contribute some goals here and there, but he's not going to come in and be a 25-goal scorer. Do I think Milano in the lineup right now makes sense, and do I think he can contribute offensively? I do, but outside of him, who are you dipping down in San Diego to grab right now? For me, the best goal scorer down there is Jacob Perreault, but it's likely, in my opinion, too early to give him that chance. I don't think he's ready for the NHL. I think he definitely needed another season with Sarnia in the OHL and see how things go there, and he likely would have spent he'll spend another season there, a couple seasons down in the OHL. If you're the Ducks right now with struggling for offense, maybe you give him a 4 or 5 game stint, or at least a couple games, just to test it out and see what you can get from him, because there aren't many options that you can go to. And obviously Max Jones is another guy who he's on the IR right now, but a guy that you could bring into the lineup and hope to get something from. But you're kind of grasping at straws in this point when you're saying, Milano might do a job for us, or Max Jones might come in and help us a little bit, or we might have to dip in and bring in Jacob Perreault into the lineup to get some offense going. And we're not trying to make this kind of a downer podcast this time around, but when you look at some of the options the Ducks have right now, if that number 1 line, if you want to call it that, with Henrique isn't firing, Comtois is the only guy getting things going right now. They don't have a lot of options to kind of bring in to supplement that scoring, and that's something we knew going into this season, that if Raquel wasn't going to get back to his goal-scoring ways, the Ducks don't have many consistent goal scorers to rely on to bring that offense.
Right, and that's the thing, right? It's, you're right, we don't want this to be a downer, but it's hard to watch the game tonight and not go to these as logical thoughts, right? When you're sitting there and you're looking at exactly what the Ducks lineup is deficient in, it's talent. Like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the guys who made the league. Like, they obviously, they'd make me look stupid in a pickup game, but I make myself look stupid anyway, so I don't need their help. But, I just think it's very easy to see what the team is lacking, and for some teams, you see that lack and you go to their prospects pool and you go, okay, I see how we're going to get there in 3 years. The problem is the Ducks don't have that. I mean, at this point, we're looking at Cody Curran, who's like 26, 27, to hopefully come over and be a above-average third-pair defenseman and create a little back-end offense. But, to the extent that, like you said, Milano can't even crack the lineup now, and we're like, well, that could make a huge difference just because he kind of can play hockey at a level offensively that none of the other guys can. It's just, it feels like for as much as they get right, there is an institutional failure to commit to being better in 4 years instead of being mediocre for 10. And we're not even mediocre. We're bad. So, it's not even like that Minnesota thing where it's like, yeah, they can make it, they can not make it. It may depend on the year, but at least you can see how they're going to get there. Short of somebody turning into a Hart Trophy finalist and John Gibson winning the Vezina for 4 straight years, like, I don't see how this team makes the playoffs in back-to-back years. Not even, you know what I mean? Like, I just, you look at the team and you're like, yeah, it's very clear what they don't have, and that isn't going to be helped by the players in the prospect pool right now. And so you're just left wondering what that means.
The saddest thing about that is that I wish Cody Curran was 26, but he's 31. So it just makes it even worse that we're relying on a 31-year-old with no NHL experience to come in and hopefully help this blue line. But yeah, I mean, you bring up Minnesota, which is a good point. Minnesota was one of those teams that for a long time fought off the rebuild and said, we committed to Parise and Suter and Mikko Koivu, and this is the team we're going with, and we're gonna either win or burn it to the ground. And eventually they got to the point this year where enough was enough, and Koivu's gone. Obviously you can't really move Suter and Parise. I know they tried to move Parise to the Islanders, I think, at the deadline, and it just kind of fell apart, and it didn't work out for them. But there was at least a commitment there, in an attempt to do that, and to move on from a guy like Mikko Koivu couldn't have been easy for that franchise. But new direction, new captain in Jared Spurgeon, you bring in Marco Rossi, you finally get over Kirill Kaprizov. You've got some young players like Matthew Boldy's a great player, and he's coming for Minnesota too. Like, there's a commitment there now that we've been talking about this for a long time. That Bob Murray has not been willing to make that commitment and say, okay, we're maybe not burning it to the ground, but this is a rebuild, and we're moving on from some of these guys, and we're gonna make a commitment to bring in some young talent and kind of rebuild it here. And it's been on and off. They moved Brandon Montour and they moved Andre Kasha, but were those the guys you should really move at that point in time? You moved out some younger players, some mid-20s type guys, where maybe you keep those guys. How I know Andre Kasha has his injury history and whatever. How much would we all love to see a player of Andre Kasha's skill level playing in this Ducks team right now, over maybe a guy like Danton Heinen, who you brought in the Andre Kasha deal, right? Like, would I rather see Andre Kasha playing with Ryan Getzlaf, even with his injury problems right now? Probably. Obviously the Ducks got other assets in that trade, but the point is, we're making these trades, and some of them kind of signal you're going in one direction, and then you sign Kevin Shattenkirk, and you bring in Cody Curran, and you bring back Derek Grant for 3 years. They're conflicting moves, and it's something we've been talking about for the last couple of years with Bob Murray.
Yeah, I think, the other thing to say is, even if it's not that way, there's not even been the clear commitment to winning now that you see, even to its detriment potentially, with teams like Pittsburgh, who are like, you know what, we're just gonna move. We're gonna move some of these picks, and we're gonna bring in players who maybe, in a vacuum, they are not worth, from a pure asset management standpoint, what you're going to get out of that pick. But we've got Chris Letang, Evgeny Malkin, and Sidney Crosby right now. And every year that we are not putting our best foot forward with those three, we're wasting them. And that's the thing for me, is he hasn't committed to a rebuild, but he hasn't committed to the win now in a way that, like, at least, when it all goes south, you can at least feel better. Be like, you know what? We really took a swing. David Perron they got in a trade for Carl Hagelin. And other than that, the only first they traded was for Patrick Eaves. And, he was fine when he was there, but, Patrick Eaves is not going to make or break anybody's team. And so, I just think they screwed themselves by being good enough because of the high-end talent to make the playoffs, but not so good that they ever made it all the way over that hump. And yeah, there's a couple of bad breaks, and you run into, a Kings team or a Chicago team. But at the same time, if you're putting all your chips into the middle of the table, maybe sometimes you catch some of those breaks a little bit better. And I think that's the thing for me. It's almost like he saw what happened from that Kessler trade and just bailed. And he was just like, I'm never doing that again. Yeah. And it's like, okay, but that did make the team demonstrably better and had a positive impact on the team. The problem isn't the trade you made. The problem is that you signed that player to a deal that everybody knew was going to be bad 2 or 3 years in. And if you win the cup in those first 3 years, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. But if you don't, now what you're doing is you're just walking around with a 100-pound backpack on, and you're weighing yourself down. And, you know, they're not getting free agents, but they're also not making trades. So that $7 million cap hit, it costs you as far as the opportunity cost of what you can do. And so it's just, you know, again, a lot of half in, half out. He's not committed to any one direction, and the roster shows that. You've got an old guy in Getzlaf who was the leader. You've got a young guy in Zegras who could be the leader, and everybody else in between is a middle six guy. You know, the two best players outside of that on the team, if you're asking me, are Lindholm and Manson, or Lindholm and Gibson. Gibson's a clear number one goalie, and Lindholm is definitely a top pair quality, but he doesn't provide the kind of offense that even someone like, you know, a Pietrangelo can provide, or a Hedman, or a Yossi, or anything like that. So as much as he is a high-end defensive defenseman, he's still not helping you score goals. And so you just have a very poorly constructed roster of good pieces and no picture. You know what I mean? I think I'm kind of screwing this up a little bit, but I think you guys get what I mean.
No,
like,
I get it. And the thing for me is, too, like, when you know you have two pieces like Zegras and Drysdale, and then you've got, you know, some supplementary pieces like Perreault, and, you know, you've got Lucas Dostal coming in. Like, you've got some decent pieces there. You know, among there's a few other guys that can make that list that I think are good pieces for the Ducks' future. And then you've got some established guys who are starting to kind of get better, in Sam Steele and Maxime Comtois. Like, you've got a nice base there, and for me, like, that should spark the GM and say, okay, you know, we've got the base here. The team itself, as it's structured right now, is not good, and we don't have time to wait for all of these pieces to either hit or make their way to the NHL. We've got to move some of these guys and, you know, be bad for a little bit and bring in some more kind of darts to hit the dartboard and try and hit with. And, you know, if you ask me, like, Henrique should have been moved a couple seasons ago, and Silfverberg should have been moved before he signed his new deal. It doesn't make a lot of sense, like the direction you kind of go in there, when, you know, you have these kind of good young pieces that are developing, you have these good young prospects coming in, and then you still, I don't buy the argument that you need to have an older core. I think you can, but I think there's a better way of going about it, and paying a guy like Adam Henrique, you know, was a six-year contract, $5.5 million, and, you know, re-upping Silfverberg is not the way to go about it. You know, you look at some other teams and the way they've done that. You look at, you know, Ottawa, committed to the rebuild. What they did is they brought in Derek Stepan. They paid him, I think, for 1 year to bring him in. They did that with Anisimov. You know, they did that with Eric Goodbranson. They know they're not going to be good, but they need some of these veteran guys to kind of, you know, fill out a team, for one, fill out a roster, but also kind of guide the young guys in if they're not ready, to have kind of guys who are NHL players or capable NHL players fill out the rest of the roster. That's what you should do if you're the Ducks. Move on. You should have moved on from Adam Henrique. Move on from Jakob Silfverberg. You know, we can debate Rickard Rakell if you want. I think he's still young enough that maybe you keep him around. But fill those spots in the lineup where Henrique and Silfverberg be with expendable guys, 1-year contracts. Maybe you push it to 2-year contracts and get assets for those guys. Commit to the rebuild. You could say maybe the same thing for Cam Fowler. Maybe the same thing for Josh Manson, who are nearing their 30s at this point. You know, Lindholm as well could enter that discussion. There has to be a commitment there where you say, okay, we've got a good kind of base. We're building to the right direction. But we've got these pieces that we could get assets for and really commit to this and really push to the point of, you know, being a competitive team and you know, getting some good young players, and we just don't see that. And I you know, maybe this is the year. You know, we're seeing development from Sam Steele and Comtois. We know we have Drysdale and Zegras on the way, and Perreault and all these other guys. I would hope that this is the year, and I don't have that much optimism in Bob Murray that he looks at it and says, okay, this is the year. You know, Adam Henrique, you got to go. Silfverberg, you got to go. And then, you know, we can make our own judgments and arguments on some of the fringe guys. that are, Raquel, Lindholm, Fowler, and Manson. Obviously, you can't move out an entire team in one season, but I think you've got to at least make 2, maybe 3 of those moves, especially when you look at the Ducks over the last couple seasons and to start this year. Like, you can't really see things getting that much better.
Yeah, so Chris, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that handle, but Chris made a point in the chat about how you can't expect firsts back for Henrique and Soph now. And that's absolutely true. I don't know, especially with the length of those contracts and the fact that both of those cap hits are over $5 million. I don't think you're going to get back a first, but before those contracts were signed, they absolutely could have gotten a first-round pick for both of those players. And that's where the mistake is, because the reason Toronto can go out and I'm going to be a little reductive here, but everybody just stay with me. The reason that Toronto can go out and sign a 29-year-old free agent like John Tavares is because they already have younger guys who have shown that they can compete at an elite level. And so when you bring in a Tavares, he's supplementing that young talent. He's giving you a little bit of that veteran leadership, and he's a high-end player, and he can make an impact. But what he's also doing is helping you give a little extra support for those young guys, Marner and Nylander and Matthews, and you hope that right as he really starts to fall off, they're in full form, and you're looking at, a couple guys who can maybe compete for the Art Ross. Austin Matthews can compete for a Hart. Any 3 of those guys in a 20-game postseason can, easily end up with Conn Smythe. And so I just think that I don't mind so much the idea of bringing in better than average older players to help younger players. The problem is we don't have the younger players that make those kinds of moves make sense.
I tend to agree that Henrique and Silfverberg may not be worth a first-round pick to most teams, but to somebody, I think, and Dalton literally just pipped what I was about to say. Tampa paid a first liner for Goodrow because they needed him. Is Barclay Goodrow worth a first-round pick? No, but did his 2-year contract at a small cap hit for what the type of player that Tampa Bay needed, was that worth a first-round pick? Well, Tampa Bay are Stanley Cup champions. Did Barclay Goodrow win them a Stanley Cup? No, but did he contribute to that roster and fill a hole that they needed to fill? Yes. And does Tampa think that was worth a first-round pick now that they have Stanley Cup rings? 100% they do. And there's a team out there that, I know Henry's contract is longer than 2 years, and he makes significantly more than Barclay Goodrow did, but there's a team out there who would be willing to pay a first-round pick for Adam Henrique, especially if you're taking salary back to kind of offset the cost there. There will be a team who would be willing to bring in Adam Henrique, a Stanley Cup contending team, as a third-line center. Adam Henrique is a great third-line center for a Stanley Cup contending team. Jakob Silfverberg is a great middle six winger for a Stanley Cup contending team at a pretty decent cost. Rickard Rakell presents extreme value for any team that is looking to compete and bring in kind of a mystery piece that maybe he rediscovers his form in a change of scenery. The Ducks have plenty of players that are worth a first-round pick to somebody out there. And, you look at Silfverberg before he signed his deal, was having a great season at the deadline. You look at the deadline prices at that time. Silfverberg could have fetched you a first plus, and the Ducks opted to keep him, miss the playoffs, and then re-sign him in the offseason. Those are the type of moves that you look back on, that you're going to look back on when, assessing the way the Ducks have kind of restructured their roster here and say, why did that not get done? You get a first-round pick and maybe a first and a third or a first and a prospect for Silfverberg from a competitive team back then, and who else do we have in our prospect system at this point in time? I trust the Ducks, scouting team to go out there and at least swing for the fences with the second first-round pick. We've seen them do that in the last couple of drafts, and you got to give them that ammunition when they've done pretty well with what they've had over the last couple of seasons, especially with late first-round picks. We can name a number of Ducks players that they've the scouting staff has kind of pipped with those last picks in the first round that have done well. Sam Steele's in the lineup right now. Maxime Comtois was a second round pick. Getzlaf and Perry were late first round picks. Shea Theodore was a late first round pick. Like, there's a lot of, for every Shea Theodore and Getzlaf and Perry, there's some guys that didn't pan out, but the more ammunition you have, and you mentioned this at the beginning of the show, the better your chances are. And that's the approach that a lot of the rebuilding teams have had. And you look at the Kings as probably the prime example across the league right now, is just piling up the draft picks. The Kings know that they can't and probably shouldn't trade Doughty and Kopitar, but they traded almost everybody else that they could. You can't really move on from Quick. That contract's too ridiculous. Jeff Carter is making a hefty sum of money, and you can't really move on from him. But the guys they could trade, they did, and they piled up the draft picks, and they've done things the right way. And there's a number of other teams who've kind of done that as well. And we're kind of still sitting here waiting. And I think this could be the year where we see some guys get moved at the deadline. It is a tough year for a lot of teams with the expansion draft coming up and a shortened season and kind of trying to make things work. But Rickard Rakell, for me, is a guy who's always going to generate interest across the league just because of how attractive his contract is and the term that's left on it, with this year and next year making less than $3.5 million for a player of that potential and that quality. That's a guy that I could see any year anybody being interested in. But maybe this is the year we see a Henrique or a Silfverberg or a Manson or a Fowler potentially get action and get moved at the deadline.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's worth noting is, because I do think, because of just the cultural cachet of a first-round pick, it's important to note, second and third-round picks are also valuable. They're obviously not as valuable as a first-round pick, but John Gibson, William Karlsson, I just pulled it up. So
across the league, Nikita Kucherov's the second-round pick. Like, there's value there.
Josh Manson was a sixth-round pick for the Ducks. Like, there are players that you can find. I mean, I think Pavel Datsyuk was like a whatever, right? Like, there are always going to be players that, when you have good scouting and a lot of luck, you can find these kinds of post-first-round players that can pan out and become impact players. They don't need to all be a Hart winner like Kucherov, but even if they are Tyler Johnson or Andre Palat, like, you're still coming out ahead. And so if it's first round pick or bust, you're already setting yourself up to fail, because now what you're doing is you're limiting your ability to maximize a player's value. Because if nothing else, we've always seen you can package up those picks and move up. And so the more ammunition that you have, the better off you are. I mean, Marcus Pettersson was a second-round pick. Marcus Pettersson would be a great player to have. I'm not trying to, like, you know what I mean, like, bring this up that way. I'm saying, like, having Marcus Pettersson on this team right now would be great. And he wasn't a first-round pick. And so I think sometimes there can be a hyper-focusing, for understandable reasons, given of how we know how the draft works, on a first-round pick. But those second and third-round picks can still be incredibly valuable. And everything after that, it's a dartboard. But you just need to hit on one of them. If you get one guy who plays 500 games for you who plays 500 games for you once out of every 5 years in those 4 through 7 rounds, that's a huge win. That's a huge success. And by not giving yourself more and more bites at the apple, you're setting yourself up to fail. And by not packaging up those picks, the ones that you already have, to bring in players, you're really limiting what you can get out of your team, and the kind of roster flexibility that comes with being able to make more aggressive moves. So
yeah, I mean, I don't remember how many second and third round picks the Kings had last year, but it was a lot. And I know director of scouting came out and said, we tried to get a first-round pick, but the price was too high. They tried to get a second one, and it just didn't work out for them. You look at the draft upcoming this year, the Kings have 2 seconds, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. They have their own first, and maybe they'll acquire a first if they can, but they know the value of, second and third round picks and fourth round picks and having, more swings at the fence and trying to just accumulate as many prospects as you can to try and hit on it. We mentioned some of these guys before, but you look at their lineup right now, and you look at Arthur Kaliev's a second round pick, and Fagimo's a second round pick, Akil Thomas is a second round pick, Jordan Spence is a third round pick, Simon Tyrell is I believe a second round pick or a third round pick, and Chromiak's a fourth round pick, and Grands is a second round pick, and Faber's a third round pick. These are all guys that a lot of them played World Juniors, a lot of them are considered not necessarily maybe steals at that point in the draft, but a bargain for where the Kings got them at. And that's the value of having a good scouting department and those extra picks, is because guys are always going to fall. And, we talk about the Hurricanes a lot. When you look at this, the draft community and the scouting community as a team that players always seem to fall to the Hurricanes and the favorites, and they always take them. Well, the Kings are starting to become that team where we're, as Ducks fans, we're looking at, okay, we want this guy. This guy's falling in the draft. Okay, we're going to take him in our pick. And then, he gets taken. Well, it's the Kings. Kaliev last year, Chromiak last year were both falling. Helliger Grands fell to the first round. The Kings snapped him up. Akil Thomas fell, and Ducks fans were hoping that he would fall to the Ducks. And I think the pick before us, the Kings took him in the second round. That's the value of having these, and yes, the Ducks have done well with their picks, but that just kind of proves my point right there, is why not have more chances to kind of go for these guys. When you look at, Chris mentioned Grew was a second round pick, Comtois was a second round pick, Terry was a fifth round pick. It's Mahura was a third round pick. I know he had injury problems, but and missed a lot of the season before he was drafted, but these are the Ducks are doing pretty well with their second, third, and fourth, and fifth round picks. This is the chance to go out and get more and kind of commit to that rebuild and imagine if they had some more swings at the fences, the prospects they potentially could have in their system at this point on top of what they already have.
Yeah, no, that's the thing that's most disappointing about that, is that we have seen the Ducks organization be successful with those late round picks. And so I don't understand why they wouldn't take a strength and, leverage that to their advantage. It just doesn't make any sense.
Brett just said Lucas Dost was the third. And I know goalies are a bit different in terms of, generally they go in the second and third round anyway. But, yeah. Right. I mean, we could talk forever about the Ducks, needing to acquire more picks. That'll definitely be something we cover at the draft. I think, we're running over an hour here. We missed fan questions on the last show, so we have to get to some of them on this one. So I'm going to read off a few we got from the last show, and then we got a bunch from this one. Caitlin asked from the last show, she said, do we see Zegras later in the season? And if yes, do you think we see him for more than 9 games? I'm not sure if this is referring to the normal kind of 10 game.
Yeah.
You burn your ELC. So we can shorten that down, I guess, to 6 for the new rule change. But do you think we see Zegras maybe later in the season rather than earlier? And if he does come in, do you think he kind of gets more than that minimum game, minimum 6 game?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. Unless he comes up and he's just clearly not ready and just looks overwhelmed from the jump, I have a hard time thinking he doesn't play 30 games with the team. I think he'll be up sooner than later. And when he does, I think if he's ready, there's no reason to send him back down. And it would be a great bone to throw to Ducks fans to be like, yeah, look at this kid. He's going to be fucking great for 10 years. So,
It'd be typical Anaheim, eh? Bring him up, not for him to make the team better, but to be like, hey guys, let's forget about how bad we are and let's look at how great this kid is.
Yeah, hey man, I'm fine with a shiny object distraction. That's cool. I got ADD, man. Like I'm fine. I'm fine having that used to my benefit for once. You know what I mean? Like I have no problem with them being like, yeah, this kid's gonna be really good for a long time. So let's see what happens.
Next question's focused on Dallas Eakins. I don't think we've talked about him too much this year. I know we're only 2 games in. But this question was, do you think Dallas is still with the team next season if we see the same results as last year? And as we've seen through the first 2 games, it looks pretty similar to last year. Do you think he is here next year if we see a similar finish to the season?
I do, yeah. I will say that to this point, I haven't seen anything that makes me think Dallas Eakins is the issue. I think he's getting some good things out of some of the players, and some of the players just aren't that good. I don't know how much to read into any of his decisions, given that he kind of clearly seems to be handed a weekend. So, I imagine Dallas Eakins is going to be the coach at the start of next season, and I would be surprised if he wasn't the coach at the start of the season after that.
It's so hard to get a read on Dallas Eakins because his previous experience, he was handed a god-awful Edmonton Oilers team and got canned from the job there, where, we can't really judge his coaching ability. When you look at that team that he had in Edmonton, it was horrible. And then you look at the team he has in Anaheim, it's not that much better in terms of the talent level they have. I think we've seen some improvements in some areas, but obviously, special teams have been a nightmare for the Ducks, and they can't score any goals, and they hemorrhage a lot of high danger chances against John Gibson. How much of that is Dallas Eakins and how much of that is the team in front of him? We would only be able to ever answer that question is if Dallas Eakins was given a better team, and compare that with somebody else if they were to coach the Ducks. Like, I'm sure if you put John Cooper on this team, are the Ducks going to do any better? Probably not. Like, they're just the roster composition just isn't that great. And at some level, I feel for Dallas Eakins with the 2 NHL coaching jobs he's gotten have been with just an awful team in front of him. I think he's here next year. I think that the team, at least for the time being, has kind of bought into him and said this is going to be the guy who's going to kind of guide us through this transition. I think that could all go out the window when Bob Murray's contract expires at the end of next season, and potentially a new general manager comes in, and that'll be their decision at that point in time. And maybe they'll give him a run out of 1 season under that new GM, whoever that ends up being. And we'll see how that goes from there. But yeah, I think as things go next season, I think at least for next season he's with the team. Josep asked a question. He said, "Do you think with the Ducks switching to the catchphrase "Fly together" and using the Wild Wing jersey that it's a signal to a major brand overhaul, or is it just them cashing in on nostalgia?"
Yeah, I would say I think it's just a new hashtag, and they know the team isn't going to be good, so what they're doing is trying to double down on the team aspect of it, right? Like, we're going to stick together and we're going to grit it out, and that's how we're going to do it. And we're like, all right, cool. Well, that's going to get us to 7 wins in 56 games. So, I don't know that I would read too much into the hashtag changing. This is a pretty conservative organization, and I don't think any major brand, changes are going to come unless either something happens that forces this brand to be unusable, or we get a change in ownership. Like, other than that, I think we're stuck with this very kind of pseudo blue collar Ducks brand, so
every time I see kind of a retro thing come out, first thing that comes to my mind is the Ducks are cashing in on how much everybody loves the Mighty Ducks era. Like, why not, right? I mean, you're gonna sell merchandise. Everybody loves, or most people love, the Mighty Ducks era and the Mighty Ducks logo and kind of the association with that. So the Fly Together hashtag is just that. It's a hashtag ties in with the Wild Wing theme they have going on, and the tie-ins they like to do with the Mighty Ducks era. So yeah, I don't think there's any brand overhaul coming anytime soon. I think the Ducks are happy with the orange and black for now, and sticking with the Web D, and then kind of tying in the Mighty Ducks logo every time they can. Well, let's see. We had another question. Okay, this one was a good one because this talks about Josh Mahura, and you know how much I love Josh Mahura. Victor on Twitter said, "Is Drysdale Mahura a defensive pair we can see in the near future in the organization, maybe starting off in San Diego?" This just got me excited because we could actually probably see Mahura and Drysdale in San Diego. We might have saw it today if the Gulls preseason game didn't get postponed due to COVID restrictions in the area. That could have been a pairing we saw in San Diego. So whether we see it in the near future of the Ducks organization, I think we might be, a year or two out from seeing a Drysdale-Mahura pairing. But I think it's definitely one we can still see this year just in San Diego.
Yeah, I think we might see it in San Diego. Do I think it's realistic that we see it at the NHL level at any point? Not really. I have a hard time thinking that they are going to play a slightly undersized offensive defenseman with a not undersized offensive defenseman. I think if anything, maybe the best version of that is a Thrun and Drysdale, or maybe a Lakeman and Drysdale, but more realistically for Josh Mahura, he's probably looking at playing with Hunter Drew, if they both come up. I just think from an organizational philosophy standpoint, they do like to have that level of balance on those pairs. Because if that wasn't a thing, why wouldn't they already just play Shattenkirk and Fowler together and just go for it? You know what I mean? We have already seen that Lindholm and Manson play incredibly well next to each other. They shut teams down. They're able to be a very solid defensive pair. So if you have that to rely on, why not just throw the other two out there and see if just the sheer overwhelming aggressiveness gets you somewhere? That to me means, unless there is a philosophical change in the organization, which would require Bob Murray to go, you're not going to see a Mahura Drysdale pair anytime soon.
I'm all for that pairing in the AHL. I think it would thrive there, just the skating ability of the two of them. But at the NHL level, I love the idea of Thrun and Drysdale together. I think that's more in line with what what the Ducks like to kind of put out on the ice in terms of kind of a responsible two-way defenseman in Thrun and kind of a more offensive-minded, puck-moving defenseman in Jamie Drysdale. The Ducks have some good defensive prospects on the way when you look at Mahura and Thrun and Lacombe and Drysdale. You gotta, I guess, add Hunter Drew to that list because I know how much you love Hunter Drew. And if you didn't see it, I put out a prospect update today, and before the show, me and Stephen were talking about a ridiculous Hunter Drew stat that he played 20 games in Slovakia when he was on loan. And he put up 16 points, which isn't even the most impressive stat about that. He had 111 penalty minutes in 20 games. So I think we're all eagerly awaiting. Josh Manson was supposed to be that guy, and we haven't seen that in at least a couple seasons of that side of Josh Manson's game. Hunter Drew seems like no matter what level he goes to, he goes there expecting violence. And he's ready to go. I mean, that's unreal. I think we broke it down. Like, if he fought every game while he was over in Slovakia, he would still be 11 penalty minutes short than what he finished with. So we'll wait and see. But Hunter Drew is definitely an interesting one on the way.
Man, I love that dude.
Man, I can't wait to see him just to see if his game will translate to the NHL level, because he's one of those guys. He's that Mark Borowiecki, like Radko Gudas type defenseman that a lot of teams like to have, where he just physical, but he can kind of hold his own in the other aspects of the game. But he's really there just to hit guys and fight guys, and and be that kind of physical, pesty, defenseman that, not every team has, but the more physical-minded and oriented teams have it. I mean, Radko Gudas keeps finding a home in the NHL for a reason, because he fits into a lineup pretty well. I mean, he does a job. So, and Hutton Drew seems like he could be one of those guys. Question from Joshua. He said, how many points do you think Sam Steele will have by the end of the season? He's got 2 assists in 2 games so far. At the end of the 56-game season, how many points do you think Sam Steele has?
I will say 45.
Ooh, I would love that.
I will go 15 goals, 30 assists.
Oh, we got 56, 38 in the chat. Hockey Boy said 87 because he's going to assist all 87 of Maxime Comtois' goals this year. Man, 45 points for Sam Steele would be great.
I mean, I think, maybe 35 is a little bit more feasible. But I think, I got to be honest, man, I'm really impressed, with how much he really seems to have made some kind of adjustment that allows him to be a much more capable player this year. And so I don't think him, busting out is out of line, especially given that I'm not sure anybody else on the roster is going to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say around 30 to 35 is maybe more a realistic target, but I agree with you. Like, obviously we talked about it earlier in the show that, like, the production and the improvement is visible so far across 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
I think, he has some more confidence, and he's bringing that creativity back into his game. If you can keep that up for the entire year and play with, Maxime Comtois and keep that chemistry going for most of the year, then it could be a breakout year, not just for him, but for Maxime Comtois as well. And if Troy Terry can tag along on that line, I think we'll eventually see some production come from him as well. And, it all comes down to chemistry at the end of the day. When you look at, top producers in the NHL, they all have chemistry on the line that they're playing on. And I think Sam Steele could benefit from that because he's kind of had a rotating, whether it be on the left or the right side, he really hasn't found chemistry on a full line since he's been introduced into the Ducks lineup. If he gets that this year, 45 is a lot, especially in 56 games. But that would be, a huge win for the Ducks. This is a guy that, after the CHL Player of the Year season he had, where he had like 136 points when he was playing with Regina, the hype was huge for him, and it's obviously died off a little bit. Since he's made the transition through the AHL into the NHL. But 45 in 56 games is a 50 to 60 point season across an 82 game year. That I think that kind of almost exceeds or hits the ceiling of what we thought, the type of player that Sam Steele could become. That's basically second line center production at that point. Mm-hmm. And if you think, whether you think Zegras is a first line center or not, or a center at the NHL level, Sam Steele producing at that level instead of maybe a third line center 30 to 40 point what we have in Henrique now is a major win for the Ducks. And when you look at their long-term future and maybe not needing a guy like Benoit Olivier Giroux or Isaac Lundestrom to try and hit that level, if you can get Sam Steele to be your bona fide second line center for the future.
Yeah, I think if Sam Steele turns into a guy who's getting between 45 and 55 points pretty regularly, I think that's just an absolute win, because he has shown that at least mentally he's understands, NHL level defense. He's got a lot to learn, obviously, but I'm not worried about him being able to play defense at the NHL level. My concerns with him are how much offense is he actually going to be able to contribute. And if he can turn into, right, like you said, right around a 50-point guy, it's huge. It's absolutely huge, and puts the Ducks in a much better spot going forward than they appear to be in right now.
All right, last question. Not really Ducks related, but I thought it was an interesting one because we've had some focus on the draft over the last couple of years. He's got 6 players here. Rank them. If you had to draft them from 1 to 6, what's your order? So the players are Trevor Zegras, Kirby Dach, Marco Rossi, Cole Perfetti, Tim Stützle, and Alex Turcotte. From 1 to 6, we'll start from the bottom. Who's your 6 up to number 1 from that list?
I might have to put Turcotte at 6.
Turcotte's my 6 too. And just because of the offensive upside for the rest of the guys, I think Alex Turcotte's going to be a great player, but the dynamic offensive skill sets for the rest of those 5 guys, you can't pass up on it.
Yeah.
For me, yeah, we'll go 1 to 5 because otherwise we could probably talk about this all night. For me, my 1 to 5 are probably Kirby Dach, Tim Stützle, Zegras, Rossi, Perfetti, Turcotte.
Yeah, I think Dak is definitely, I think, my 1. I think, I think I would say it this way. I think Dak, Zegras, and Stützle would be my top 3.
Yeah.
And I think Rossi, Perfetti, and Turcotte would be my bottom 3.
There's just a separation there, I think, of those 2 sets of 3.
Yeah, I'm really high on Dak. He's got, good playmaking ability and stuff, but he's also got good size, and I'm just a sucker for that shit, man.
He was touted as the next Getzlaf at the draft, and he still kind of is, right? So.
Yeah, he's got that ability. He's got the skill level to really be able to use his frame in a productive manner in a really successful way. So, I think for me, that's why he's so high up there. I think Stützle just has incredible skill. Him and Zegras, I think you could maybe talk yourself into going any order, but I do think Stützle seems to be more willing to shoot at this point, which, just raises his floor a little bit higher.
Yeah, it's close. I think for those 2, it's close. Dak, just because of the progression and the fact that out of all of them, he's the only guy who's played a full season in the NHL at this point. He kind of takes the cake as the number 1 guy. And Marco Rossi just kind of misses out on that top 3, just because I hate the size argument in the NHL, but for Marco Rossi at basically 5'8", 5'9", it's still is an issue, especially if he's going to be a center. All right.
Absolutely.
I think that pretty much wraps up the show. We've got, what's the next game? Minnesota on, is it Monday? I think it's Monday.
I think Monday.
Yeah, Minnesota Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We will be live after that game. We're live after pretty much every game this year with the post-game show, except for back-to-backs. We're live at the second game of the back-to-back for those sets. I can't wait till the 5-game stretch where we play the Kings to do those post-game shows, because that's going to be a wild series.
I have talked about it 2 separate times today. I am so excited for it. It is going to be an absolute blast. So that'll be a good time. That definitely is something to look forward to.
I think the broadcast said earlier today it's the first time that a team will play another team 5 times in a row in any season, which I guess makes sense because you're in a regular season schedule, you're never going to play one team 5 times in a row. But that's just going to be wild. It just adds to it that it's one of the best rivalries in the NHL, and Ducks and Kings hate each other, and a lot of the players from when that rivalry was at its heyday, 4 or 5 years ago, are still there, and Doughty and Kopitar and Carter and Dustin Brown, and obviously Getzlaf, Fowler and Lindholm are still there, John Gibson. So yeah, it's going to be wild. I'm getting told we got to answer this last question before we move on. Nade asks, will Bob Murray be here next year? I say yes, because he has 1 more year left on his contract, and that's it. There's no point in literally firing him with the 1 year left.
I am going to hedge a little bit, and I will say that he is, but I don't think he's the GM. I think he's going to get the dreaded promotion.
The dreaded Randy Carlyle promotion. Did Randy Carlyle ever get that promotion? Is he in the organization?
I think he still might technically be in the organization, but honestly, I was thinking more of like Dale Talon,
A head of
or
hockey
Ken
ops
Hall.
type thing.
Yeah, where they're just like, yeah, thanks, and then they bring in somebody under him to be like VP of hockey operations or whatever, and they're the ones who run the day-to-day hockey stuff. I think that there's only so many times that Bob Murray's going to be able to go to the Samuelis and say, no, 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 but next season they're going to take a jump. And I just,
He only can do that
would-
one more time, and that's next year. So I can't see him getting
what?
another extension after this.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't. Unless, like I said, they give him, an extra year and a pay increase as just like a, basically like a de facto pension, and just be like, look, thanks for everything you did. You did a great job, but we just need to move on. So I will say that he is, but I don't think he's in charge.
I think, not that I hate Bob Murray, and obviously the last couple of years have kind of made it difficult to root for him. But I think for this franchise and for fans of this franchise, a new direction, a fresh face is exactly what this team and this organization needs. Different direction, a new philosophy, a new approach to signing, drafting, acquiring players. We've had the same thing for so long, and obviously there was a high level of success for a long period of time for the Ducks, and then now we're kind of getting into that lower end of the period that every team goes through of ups and downs of being a highly competitive team and now kind of having to rebuild and get back to that point. Those kind of lows are always accompanied by either a coaching change, a change in general manager, or both. And we got the coaching change, and I think we're slowly moving towards that kind of final piece of the puzzle of bringing in another general manager, and whether that successor to Bob Murray is a guy who sticks around for 10 years or not, that remains to be seen. It depends on who comes in and what point in the transition period the Ducks are in. But even if that guy comes in and lasts 2 or 3 years, it's still just that fresh feeling around the organization of having kind of a different guy running the franchise, a new direction, and everything like that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, to my own personal benefit for many years, and to my absolute chagrin the last couple, Bob Murray has been a very steady presence. He has basically just tried to continue to do roughly what Brian Burke did without, the exciting trade thing. And so, I do think that we will get to a point as Ducks fans where we look back and we do appreciate how consistent and steady a presence he was. But I do think it's at the point where we are going to need a fresh perspective on this roster, because Bob Murray's been with the team as long as Getsy has. You know what I mean? So, I just don't know that he's going to be able to kind of find that separation and be able to make the kinds of moves and changes that need to happen over the next couple of years if Anaheim wants to get back to being a high-level competitor.
All right. That wraps up the show for today. As I mentioned, Minnesota on Monday, Minnesota on Wednesday, Colorado on Friday, Colorado on Sunday. We'll be live for all 4 of those games. Ducks finish out the month of January with 2 games against Arizona, 2 games against St. Louis. We'll be live for both the Arizona games and for the second of the back-to-back against St. Louis. A tough schedule up ahead, but, this is what's to be expected in kind of the shortened season and the way the division is set up for the Ducks this year. Minnesota should present an interesting test, as we mentioned before. Back-to-back comeback wins against the Kings. They're right around that bubble of where we think the Ducks could finish in terms of fighting for kind of 4th or 5th this year in the division and maybe squeaking in for that last playoff spot. So this will be kind of a real test for the Ducks to see how they stack up against the team that's probably going to be the one that they're fighting with if they want to make the playoffs and if they can push in front of teams like Arizona, LA, and San Jose. So we'll be live with that show, always 15 to 20 minutes after the game. And take care, guys. We appreciate you guys coming out and looking forward to it.
Thanks, everybody.